The reason why I'm going to tell you to replace the battery is because if you turn your starter over really slow, and unfortunately in the electrical lecture that I have, we have light boards that we can play with. It's got an electric fan on it, and we can put a pencil or something on the fan and slow it down. When you slow an electrical motor down, the amperage goes up. And so anytime you load something heavier, it goes up. And that's what happens with a starter as it slows down. If you've got a weak battery and you crank it really slow, what happens is each bar on the armature on the starter has more time for amperage to flow. And 1 amp is 6.2 billion electrons past a given point per second. And so that's part of the electrical lecture that we missed. And 6.2 billion electrons past a given point, and that starter is drawing about 100 amps. This is a pretty small starter, and it draws about 100 amps. And so if you take 100, multiply it by 6.2 billion, that's a lot of movement, a lot of electrons flowing through that wire. And if I slow the starter down to where those electrons have more time to travel through each wire, it heats up the wire and it causes more amperage to flow. And so when you crank and this battery is low, it's going whoom, whoom, whoom. The amperage draw from your starter, from the battery, skyrockets and goes really high. And if you don't replace the battery and you just, I know if I hold it just long enough, it'll just barely start every time. What's happening is you're excessively loading your starter and it wears out your starter. So when the battery finally fails, your starter fails right after it. And so if you replace it before it gets that low, it'll save your starter. Any other questions? One thing that there is on this particular machine, it's got a Kawasaki. It's the same engine Kawasaki is used in the golf and turf industry in their fairway, their trim mowers and their greens mowers. When we start this thing, even though it's warm, Kawasaki's are designed to start in a choke. If you don't put this fully into choke, it won't start. And one of the labs that we typically run, but we didn't get to run this year, was a throttle choke plate adjustment. And on this machine, there's a plate right here on the side that sets RPMs, low idle, and choke adjustment. And there's a little bar right here that attaches to the choke plate. And when I put this in choke, this bar shouldn't move. And if you look at this one where my finger's at, it's moving. That means that this choke is not fully applied. Even though the lever doesn't move anymore, I'm not fully choked. And we've been having problems with this thing actually starting. You crank it and it starts, but not very well. The problem is I'm not fully choking it. And a Kawasaki, even when it's warm, if you don't pull the choke, it won't start. That's just the way they're designed. They have the engine, the carburetors running so lean, and they're fixed jet carburetors, you can't mess with them. They're so lean that if you don't choke it, it won't start, even when they're warm. That's just one of the little trademarks of Kawasaki. But if you have one that you do put it in choke and it still doesn't want to start, check that adjustment. Make sure that just look at the bar, move the bar. If the bar moves, it's out of adjustment. And it needs to be adjusted. And it will save you wear and tear on your battery. It saves you wear and tear on your starter. And you won't flood it because you're turning too slow. And they start better, they run better. So this one here has a tendency to foul plugs because it doesn't start very well. Well, the problem is right here in this choke lever. This choke lever is not adjusted correctly. And it's a very simple adjustment. The book has a step-by-step procedure. You just follow it, and it runs great.